First, the USDA's Justice for All non-discriminatory statement, which simply states that all persons must be treated equally without regard to their race, color, national origin, sex, religious creed, disability, age, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity, and that our institution provides an inclusive space for all. For more information on the And Justice for All statement, please visit the USDA's website.
Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. My name is Commie and I work for Rutgers Cooperative Extension in the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences for New Jersey SNAP Ed. And I am here today, this Tuesday, to talk to you guys about fresh, frozen, and canned vegetables. I'm going to tilt the camera down so we can see my table. I have a nice spread of the variety of all three, and we can talk in depth about all three, what makes them different, what positives come out of all of them, because all of them have their own strengths and weaknesses, and how to decide what works best for you. All right, so let's get into our lesson. When we're looking at the three options for produce, some of us might have a go-to, whether it might be fresh or canned or frozen. Some of us might have a favorite. Some of us look for quality or some high nutritional value, or we like to stay on budget and go whatever works for our budget and avoids food waste. So think about what works for you and your household and how it can vary from each product of produce. And it can either be fresh, canned, or frozen, or a mixture of both. So as we chat again about some key characteristics of the different forms of produce, we're going to look at some specific examples so you can make your own decision when you're meal planning or shopping for this produce. So let's start with our fresh products. Our fresh produce, is the most popular form. Most Americans or most people actually prefer fresh produce because they think it gives you the most nutrition and the most value. But sometimes fresh isn't always that fresh. That is because when fresh produce is being picked as a crop, it's picked, then it's sent to a warehouse for storage, and between that time, there's some transit time to get to the warehouse for storage, and then there's transit times for it to get to the grocery store where we grab our items, and there might be several days before you actually crack something open, chop it up, and eat it. So there's several days between when it's picked. It can be weeks, and between the picking time and when you're about to eat it. So between that time, some nutrition and flavor can get lost in this, delay, or the food can get spoiled if you don't use it as quickly as you want to, because there's some time lost on its freshness. So fresh can be also more expensive than frozen or canned foods. This is because the demand that it meets in the grocery store, the travel time, that demand is high and it costs more to get it from that warehouse to the grocery store and stocked. And then its storage needs when it's at the warehouse. What temperature is it in? How is it, kept fresh in whatever way? Is it cleaned? Is it watered? And then at the grocery store, it's stocked. So with that comes with more added expenses because of that demand. Other things that you want to consider when you are picking up fresh produce is how time consuming it can be when you are thinking of making a meal with some tomatoes or with some peas or with some lemon. You have to think about cleaning your produce because it's important to clean your produce. You have to think about trimming your produce, chopping up, or cutting. So that prep time can be time consuming. And for people who are very busy and don't have that patience or time in their schedule, that can be limiting. Also, the variety of fresh produce can be limited due to the time of year. So fresh produce has a seasonal rotation, whether it is tomatoes in the summertime or it can be spinach in the fall. Fresh produce is found at its most fresh in that season that it's harvested at. So you want to keep that in mind. The growing seasons cause limited variety in the supermarket for that fresh produce that you might be looking for. Again, when we're talking about harvesting fresh produce, it's often harvested before its peak. So that means if you harvest fresh produce before its peak, it's not as ripe as it usually would be. And they do that to extend the shelf life, to make up for that time that it's picked, it's at the warehouse, it's in transit to the grocery store, and it's picked up by a consumer like you or I. So they do that for a reason, but it can reduce its taste, its texture, and sometimes its appeal because it's picked before it is actually really ripe. And then obviously the obvious one would be, fresh produce does spoil faster than other modes of getting your produce in, like cans or frozen. So, that is a hard thing to deal with because, you're spending your money on fresh produce, and then before you get to cook it, you might forget about it, or you might not have that perfect recipe for that item, so you leave it off, and then all of a sudden it doesn't look so well, looks a little slimy, and you're unsure about it. So it's safer to throw it out, but we are trying to limit food waste, dollar waste, and with that, fresh produce might not be the best option if you find yourself with forgotten vegetables or forgotten fruits. So that's with our fresh vegetables and fruits. There are good things that come with fresh produce. A lot of people, like I said, prefer fresh over canned, frozen, or dried vegetables anyway. So fresh produce also guarantees that there are no additives or preservatives in any of your produce. Some things just work better for fresh that you can't get frozen or canned, such as lettuce to make a nice salad. You can't use frozen spinach for a salad, but you can use fresh spinach for a salad. Other things are like, snack items that you use for fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables, like if you're talking about vegetable sticks. You're cutting up some peppers, cutting up some carrots to have as a snack. It does not quite work as well when you use canned or frozen for those type of snack items that are healthy. So it is best to use fresh when it comes to those snack items, and when you're looking for a guarantee of no additives, no preservatives in your food. Still, like I said, it has its pros and cons. A lot of people prefer fresh produce over the other two. We'll talk about the other two next, but just a quick note about fresh produce. If you're still interested, to really reduce your cost for fresh produce and reduce your, lack of taste and flavor, it's best to look for locally grown produce. There are plenty farms around the state of New Jersey, especially in southern New Jersey, and there are many farmers markets as well. So some even run year round, and if you look for those options, they're locally grown, locally picked, and it would get to you faster. It's probably fresher than what you can get at the grocery store, and most of the time it's a lot less for your dollar. So good mode to check out would be locally grown produce at farmers markets or sold at farms in general. So moving on from fresh, we are going to move to canned. Like the frozen food that we'll get into later, canned vegetables are usually harvested at their peak ripeness, unlike fresh vegetables. So they are usually more tasteful, but they are more processed. So the canning process calls for more processing, and that processing can include adding additives to make sure that the quality of the food inside the can is not destroyed. And those additives can be sometimes very harmful for our bodies over long term. Additives can include dietary sodium, so salt or sugar. And dietary sodium, which you'll see on the label, or salt, can lead to high blood pressure and can raise the risk of having heart disease, or the sugars can raise your blood sugar and raise the risk of you having, diabetes or any high blood pressure, any high blood sugar related disease. So it's best if you do go for canned. It is a great option for taste and nutritional quality. However, you want to make sure that the can either includes less sodium on the label, which it says here. You can find it on the label right here. It says 50% less sodium, or you can look on the back and look for the sodium content on the nutrition label. You also can look for ones that say no sodium added. Most cans like to advertise that because it is, something that we're all looking for, less sodium in our diet. It's good to keep it low for those reasons that I mentioned. So you want to look for those cans that have either no preservatives, no additives, and if you can't get that, you want to look for no sodium added, no salt added, or no sugar added. If you are unable to find your canned vegetables or fruits that have no sugar added or no sodium added, then what you can also do is you can make sure that you rinse and drain your canned produce. So you can use a strainer. We have different sizes. Different sizes work for different things. Like I can drain a can of beans. That sodium, those preservatives, and that dark, syrupy water that it stands in, that gets drained out. Rinse it out, rinses off the excess that is on your produce. So that is our canned produce. Again, you want to look for no salt added on the label, or no sugar added, or reduced sodium on the nutrition label on the back, or advertised on the front of the canned. Again, canned vegetables have their pros. The biggest advantage would be that they're highly shelf stable. So you can buy a bunch of canned vegetables and pack it in your pantry and not have to worry about going to the store to buy fresh produce or looking in the freezer for and save some freezer space for some frozen produce. So this is a great way to stock up. It's bang for your buck because it usually costs anywhere from less than $1 to the high $1 amount. And they come in different sizes, so you can guarantee that you'll use less, you'll waste less food because you can get either can of tomatoes you can get in a 4-ounce can, or you can get a 10-ounce can, 14-ounce can, all the way up to almost 30-ounce can. So you can pick the different sizes that work for that meal, or you can get a variety of them, stock up on them. It is budget friendly, and you don't have to worry about produce not being available year round. You can pick up your tomatoes, you can pick up your peaches, you can pick up your pineapples and your green beans, and you don't have to shop in season. So that is very helpful when it comes to canned. That's their biggest advantage. Again, we're looking out for the additives and the preservatives, washing them away if we can avoid them, and we're draining out the excess syrup or water that it stands in. So moving on to our final set of produce, I'm just going to move it up here. We have our frozen. So our frozen produce, it is also preserved immediately upon harvesting. So when the farmers are in the fields, they pick the crop and they are preserved and frozen upon harvest. So that nutritional content is pretty much tastes fresh, and it's comparable to canned or fresh. It's actually tastes a little bit better. So frozen is also cheaper than fresh, similar to canned. It's probably in the middle. I would say it's in the middle between fresh and canned. And the produce you can get out of season again. You can find strawberries frozen, you can find spinach frozen, you can find peas frozen year round. So it works for whatever you have, a hankering for. You can find it in the frozen food aisle, and you can save money because it's not as expensive as fresh produce. It's actually much more budget friendly, and it tastes just as great. So other pros that come with frozen vegetables and frozen fruits would be the flexibility, like we mentioned, and you can use what you need. Like this is a resealable bag, so you can open it up, use how much frozen strawberries you need. They also come like pre-cut. Some of them can be diced, some of them can be whole. These are whole strawberries. I can pick up a cup in here, reseal the bag, and put it back into the freezer and use that cup. So it reduces food waste if it spoils. It does not spoil as quickly as fresh produce. Again, good nutrients, good taste, year-round availability, and it keeps that texture while eating it. So some cons to frozen vegetables would be some of the same that have happened with canned, those preservatives that can either be salt to keep them, as together and stable, or some additives like sugar. So you want to check your label to make sure that it has, if not, it is preservative free or additive free. You want to make the right decision for you based on your nutrition label. So check the label. Some of them say it on the front, especially with fruit. Fruit already has natural sugars in it, so you want to avoid any added sugars. This one says no sugar added, so you're looking for things that say no sugar added, no sodium added, so they have that original content in them, and so you're not getting any more of those sugars and any salt or sodium, because again, we want to avoid those things that can raise our blood pressure or raise our sugar, our blood sugar, to avoid the risk of any diet-related diseases later on in life. So let's go over some examples. Since we just talked about all three, we identified the differences between them, some pros and some cons, like cost, taste, availability, things like that. Let's go over some concrete examples. The first example I want to chat about would be talking about fresh lemon juice and lemon juice in a bottle. So fresh lemon juice, it's easy to find lemons year round, but they might be more expensive per pound. Bottled lemon juice, you can find this year round as well. And recipes often call for lemon juice or lemon zest and things like that. And as easy as it seems like to just replace lemon juice that's in a bottle with fresh lemon juice, sometimes the flavor does not quite keep up. If you've ever had bottled lemon juice, sometimes it has preservatives or additives like sugar and sodium that just does not capture the taste of fresh lemon juice, or that freshness of fresh lemon juice. It doesn't get those nice, the lemon pulp in it like a fresh lemon would. So, a lot of people don't like to buy fresh produce because it does spoil. And whenever a recipe does call for fresh lemon juice, you only use about a cup or a half of a cup. So the others go to waste if you don't use it. Thing that you could do, a nice lemon juice hack that you could do is you could use whatever lemon juice that you use, and then the remaining you can put in an ice tray. It can go in an ice tray and stick it in the freezer, and then you can defrost it for later use, or you can put it in your water. That's another thing. Fresh produce is really good for flavoring water if you want that extra taste, where anything bottled or canned doesn't really quite capture that fruity taste that you're looking for without any additives or without any added syrups or anything like that. So fresh lemon juice is the way to go when it comes to lemon juice, whether it's bottled or fresh. You definitely want to go with fresh, and you can preserve it yourself in your freezer using an ice tray. So that's a little hack for you. Our next example we'll talk about would be peas. Fresh peas versus frozen peas. Just to give a little background on peas, So peas, when they're picked, they naturally contain a carbohydrate that is called starch. And when fresh peas are picked, when they're picked in the field, they soon become, and this is a naturally occurring process, the starch in the peas actually start to turn, and the peas start to, take on this other trait of being like grainy and have a less of a fresh taste. It's a little bit more dull on the taste end of fresh peas. And again, we talked about that transit time from farm to table. It can be a week, can be 2 weeks, depending on where you live, depending on how often those fresh produce come in. So depending on where you're getting that produce. So fresh peas might not taste as great as a fresh pea can taste, whereas frozen peas are picked at their ripeness, unlike fresh. So frozen peas are going to taste ripe, are going to have that great taste instead of that grainy taste. So it's probably recommended for a taste, on a taste basis, to go with frozen peas. And again, it has that frozen element where you can take as much as you need and use as much as you need, freeze the rest. Or you can, a lot of frozen foods now have a microwavable bag, so it's easy to clean, easy to cook with. It's like a set it and forget it and then use it. So frozen peas do become superior when it comes to taste and ease when it comes to fresh peas. And of course, cost. And our last example that we'll go over will be tomatoes. So let's talk about canned tomatoes versus fresh tomatoes. So canned tomatoes are super easy to use. Most cans now come with like a pull top, such as this one. Pull top, easy to open up. Again, they come in different varieties of how they're produced. So they can either appear chopped, whole, peeled, diced, things like that. These are peeled whole tomatoes, and so they take after plum tomatoes or any Roma tomatoes, things like that. And when it comes to fresh tomatoes, they're a seasonal vegetable. So fresh tomatoes, seasonal fruit, excuse me. So fresh tomatoes are in the summertime. They're harvested in the summertime. So they're readily available. They taste great. They're awesome. The price can go up out of season. That's one thing you want to look for. And their quality can start to dull down out of season. So you'll notice that with the pick that your local market or grocery store has for tomatoes. And you might want to start to venture towards the can aisle and get canned tomatoes, because again, you can have this in your pantry. It's super easy to use. It's already peeled, and it can be whole, or again, it can be chopped and ready to cook with. Easy for stews, easy for soups, easy for any meal really when you're using tomatoes. Those canned tomatoes are really handy to have in your pantry ready to go, rather than digging through a bunch of tomatoes at the store. But some people do prefer getting their tomatoes, chopping them themselves, peeling them themselves. And if that's what you want to do, and if it works for your schedule, that is okay. It's simply just a preference. So if you are looking to save some time, looking to save some money, out of season, tomatoes in a can would be your best option. And again, you want to make sure that the label does include the sodium content. If it says no sodium added or 50% less, if it doesn't, look on the back and make sure there's no salt in the ingredient list or added salt up here when we're talking about sodium. All right, so I hope that we learned a little bit more about what the differences are between fresh, canned, and frozen vegetables and fruits. There's no superior one over the other. Really, that's the takeaway. Some items don't work well when it comes to canned or frozen. Like I said before, lettuce, vegetables, snack items, things like that. If you're making a salad, they just don't work with canned or frozen, so you have to go with fresh, and that's okay. And fresh produce is the best in season, so especially if it's locally grown. So if you find locally grown fresh produce, jump on it because it's tasteful, and it's probably less expensive, and it's readily available. But fresh should not be the only thing in your diet. If that's the only thing you're going for and you can't find something, there are other options like canned or frozen. It can be your first choice, but just know that you have other options for your diet. And really, the more you get your fruits and vegetables in daily, the better. And we're all busy, we're all time consumed with our lives, and we have other things going on. So when it comes to cooking, if it's pulling something off the shelf, some canned black beans off the shelf in the pantry, or pulling some broccoli from the freezer, then so be it. If that means that you're going to get your servings in for the day, then do it. We want to eat a rainbow, so you want to make sure that you're getting a variety of produce, whether it's fresh, canned, or frozen. And questions to ask yourself when you're going to meal plan, or you're going to the grocery store is what fits for your timetable, what works for you and your schedule when it comes to preparing a meal, what gives you the best value for your household, and what keeps you on track financially. And then what are you going to like and eat? You want to make sure that you like the idea of canned carrots before you get it, and then it just stays on the shelf. If you prefer fresh, get fresh. If you prefer canned, get canned. I recommend trying it. Why not? You're getting in your necessary nutrients, and you're going to have a different variety of colors, tastes, and flavors to cook with. So thank you for joining us for this Facebook Live today on fresh, frozen, and canned vegetables and fruits. Hope you enjoyed it.